All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Derek Pattenden. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Nations Royalty. I'm very pleased to be able to talk about our company today. We are an Indigenous mining royalty company, and I can assure you this will be a pitch you haven't seen before because this is a first of its kind company. I will be making some forward-looking statements. So the mining royalty business model, it's been a very successful business model in mining, principally because it offers investors a way to get exposure to commodity prices, but with reduced operating risk. And that's because a mining royalty company, it doesn't operate any mines, right? We make no decisions about where to drill or which tunnels to go down. We largely sit in an office and collect periodic checks from mining companies, whether that be a percentage of profits at a mine or a percentage of revenue at a mine or something in between. And then that largely frees up the employees of the company to spend most of their time looking for new mine royalties to add to their company's portfolio. And then as they build out a portfolio of more and more royalties, that offers investors increased diversification from essentially having bets on many different mining assets as opposed to only a few. Now, the model is not without its challenges. A big one today is it is hard to grow. Right? It's hard to have an endless stream of high quality royalties that you can keep adding to your portfolio. This is largely because the business model has been around for decades, and so the royalties have been picked at for decades, right? A lot of the high quality ones are gone. And so much so that in the modern era, a lot of mine royalty companies have to essentially create a mining royalty in a transaction, most typically with a single asset development stage mining company as it approaches construction. A mine royalty company might, offer to give it some cash to help fund construction in exchange for creating a new royalty. And the space is very competitive. There are, over 20 different mining royalty companies out there today, all fighting over the same assets. And so you might quite reasonably ask, why be the, greater than 20th new mining royalty company on the scene? What is your advantage? What is your edge? What are you going to do differently? So at Nations Royalty, we are Canada's largest majority Indigenous-owned public company. Again, it's the first of its kind. We were founded in June of 2024, so a little more than half a year old. And that was the first time in Canada's history where an Indigenous group took assets that it owned and put it inside of a publicly traded company in an Indigenous control position and did it in a major way. So we are majority Indigenous owned, we're majority Indigenous managed, and we're majority Indigenous governed. And that's a very important setup for our vehicle because we are in the Indigenous royalty space, which we see as the last untapped royalty space in the landscape. What's an Indigenous royalty? So as a project is moving forward in Canada, it'll often hit a point where it'll enter into an impact and benefit agreement with a local Indigenous group. There's many things in that agreement, ranging from environmental protections, protecting hunting, fishing rights. But a part of that agreement can contain a financial payment from the mining company to the Indigenous group. And more recently, some of those payments have started taking the form of royalties, hence the Indigenous royalty landscape. And so we offer investors a way to get diversified exposure to many different Indigenous royalties, but all in tier 1 safe jurisdictions such as Canada. And we believe we have a viable path to potentially create a top mining royalty company, as we'll get into. So the man on the left there, he's a major shareholder of the company. His name is Frank Giustra. He's the head of the Fiore Group. He's been a very successful mining entrepreneur. He was just recently inducted into Canada's Mining Hall of Fame a couple of weeks ago. Perhaps the company most relevant to us is he was the founder of Wheaton Precious Metals, which is the largest mining royalty company in the world, market cap probably around 44 billion Canadian. And then the man on the right there, he's Charles Morvan. He's the Secretary Treasurer of the Nisga'a government. And they are a First Nation from northwestern British Columbia that has a very bold vision of economic self-determination for their people. And they know that in order to achieve that vision, they need to build businesses, and in particular, they need to build big businesses. And so they see Nations Royalty as a key cornerstone investment for them to help execute on that vision. So moving to our assets in the company. So this company was founded from the Nisga'a Nation vending into the company 5 of its royalties on its impact and benefit agreements into Nations Royalty in exchange for shares of the company. So the royalties are on these 5 assets. So again, these are all in Northwest British Columbia because that's Nisga'a Nation territory. First one, Brucejack mine, high-grade underground gold mine, owned and operated by Newmont, very large gold company, producing a little over 300,000 ounces a year. That one's in production. The Premier mine and Red Mountain mine, those are owned by Ascot Resources, probably about $140 million market cap. Currently targeting commencing ore throughput in July of 2025, so near production. And then the other 2 are projects. So the smaller of the 2 is Kitsault. That is a molybdenum deposit. It's privately owned by New Moly, which is majority owned by Resource Capital Funds. And then you have KSM, which is the largest asset in our portfolio, probably the bulk of our company's value at the moment. That's owned by Seabridge Gold, about a $1.7 billion company. And what's unique about that asset is it is the largest permitted gold copper deposit in the world. It has over 47 million ounces of gold and over 7 billion pounds of copper in reserves alone. And according to its study, in the first 7 years, would be scheduled to produce 1.4 million ounces of gold per year. And to put that into context, that's about double the size of the largest operating gold mine in Canada today. So this is the starter kit for our royalty company. This page here is really what our company's all about. This is the opportunity set that we're focused on. This is the Indigenous royalties. And this chart is payments from mining companies to Indigenous groups over time. You can see in 2023, it's about $350 million. We don't have the 2024 data yet. If you were to include energy, this would go over $700 million. And a key part of why this is growing over time is simply because Indigenous groups have been able to get better and better terms in these impact and benefit agreements, and particularly getting more and more terms that are tied to metal price increases. So that way, as the metal prices rise over time, these groups are actually able to start getting larger and larger payments, and this is what we're focused on. This is your classic chart of market cap versus price to net asset value. Every dot on this page represents a mining royalty company. And you can see there's a pretty strong trend here where typically bigger is better in the mining royalty world. As you build out a larger portfolio with more mine royalties, you tend to get rewarded with higher valuations in the market. And I would also point out what's going on here too is typically the bigger mining royalty companies can largely go after the highest quality royalties. So those are things that are in safe jurisdictions, advanced economic stage, have world-class operators, and are generally quite big, like high amounts of annual production. And then the smaller royalty companies have to go after what is left over from that. So more challenging jurisdictions and perhaps earlier economic stage assets. So essentially having to place a bet, buy a royalty on a deposit before it's clear to everyone that it will definitely be a mine. And what we are doing differently is we're in the Indigenous royalty space. So we're looking at different assets than the rest of these dots. And if I were to show you a chart of Indigenous-owned mining royalty companies, there would be one dot on this page. So on the corporate development front, we're prioritizing Canada and precious metals because the 5 or 6 of the largest mining royalty companies in the world are all precious metal focused. That's how you get the highest multiples. We're also very focused on revenue generating assets to boost short-term revenue for the company. We will also look at energy and critical metals opportunities as they come up to us. We're currently in discussions with over 60 different Indigenous groups across the country. And we're also providing financial advisory services to Indigenous groups to help them in their negotiations with mining companies on those impact and benefit agreements. And that serves 2 important points for us. I mean, one, it's an excellent opportunity for us to start a relationship and earn trust with a nation, show them we're on their side and we do good work and we're going to help them get a good agreement. And then that sets a natural pathway for us to then explore a potential partnership with Nations Royalty, either concurrently with that IBA negotiation or after the fact. And then also because when a mining company is, trying to figure out how much it will be paying a local Indigenous group in its IBA agreement, it will often look out to see what other groups are getting as sort of a benchmark. And that way, a rising tide lifts all boats. And if we can help different Indigenous groups get better terms in their deals, then we believe that'll help just increase the size of the Indigenous royalty landscape, which is, again, helpful to us because that's what we're focused on. This is our team. In the top left, you have Robert McLeod. He's our interim CEO. He's a geologist by background. He has a very long family history with the Nisga'a Nation. And really him, Frank Justra, and the Nisga'a Nation were the 3 key ingredients to start this company. He is interim, though, because he's non-Indigenous and will shortly be transitioning to a fully Indigenous management team. You have myself, the CIO, a member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte First Nation, Tyendinaga. I was a 15-year mining investment banker focused on mergers and acquisitions, worked on over $20 billion of transactions in that time, probably about 15 plus in the gold space. We have Josh Kears, he's our CFO, he's Métis, also investment banking background. Cody Penner from the Tahltan Nation, our VP Corporate Development. He has a rich job history ranging from underground miner to corporate development office at Teck Resources to serving his own nation in their economic development department. Sam Bresden, she has joined us recently, external relations manager. She's Korean Métis and has history on working in Indigenous relations. And then Stephanie Azak, our corporate secretary from the Nisga'a Nation, again, our founding shareholder. And then on the board, I point out Alec Morrison. He's not Indigenous, but he's there for very good reason. He was the founding CFO of Franco-Nevada, which is the 2nd largest mining royalty company in the world, probably about $40 billion. So you can see between Alec on our board and Frank Justra as an advisor, we actually have two of the founders of the two largest mining royalty companies in the world on our team right now. And then the rest of the board shown there. And the Nisga'a Nation, they'll be appointing a new member shortly, and that's why that graphic's there. And so lastly, our share structure, we're about a 55-cent stock, current market cap around 80 million. If you look to that pie chart, that's really the three main shareholder groups. 77% is the Nisga'a Nation, 16% is the Fiore Group and management team, and then 8% public equity float. And if you combine that red and green chunk, that's about 92% of the stock that's subject to a 3-year escrow agreement. So it's a very tightly held company. And last financials, we had about 7 million cash and we had no debt. And we believe that's, plenty of funds for us to have the time to actually build these new partnerships and start building this royalty company, because we are looking for predominantly share transactions with Indigenous groups. So we don't quite have the same cash requirements as, say, a traditional royalty company. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions. And if we run out of time, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'd always be more than happy to talk about this company.
Well, I love it when somebody stays within their time limit. Good job. That was perfect. Happy to take questions here. If you have any questions, please type them in. And while those are popping up, I've got a couple questions myself here. Like, what's your biggest advantage, like your competitive advantage in the mining royalty space? Like, you're going up against a lot of big boys. This is a big boy game, right? A huge boy game.
Yeah.
How do you creep in there a little bit more?
The biggest advantage is being able to go to these Indigenous groups as Indigenous peoples ourselves and tell them that, you've worked really hard to finally start getting better terms, and these assets are very valuable, and we believe they belong to stay in Indigenous hands. And so us being the only Indigenous controlled vehicle that can offer that, that's really compelling. And also because, I would say if a lot of the high quality royalties today are in Indigenous hands, they'd be better off forming a mining royalty company of their own, right? Because if you vended into a royalty giant, you're going to own 0.1% of that company, and you're only going to get 0.1% of the unlocked value of what those high quality assets can be worth when they're pooled together with other ones. So, right. And partner with us, you could be getting board seats if you're a major shareholder and stuff. So you can have a lot more governance over this asset that you work so hard to get.
Yeah, 100%. Now, do you think you'll be sticking to Canada?
In the near term, yes. Long term, we could go international. There's obviously Indigenous groups all over, but frankly, there's so much wood to chop in Canada right now because the space is entirely untapped. Like I showed you those payments, and we believe those will be growing over time. And there's been one transaction in that space. So that's the unique part about this company is, for a lot of mining royalty companies, it might take them, 9 to 12 months to find an opportunity. And when they do, they can transact on it in, say, a month. Whereas for us, we can find a ton of opportunities in a month. But then it's gonna take us that 9 to 12 months to build that relationship, to earn that trust, to be able to get a partnership. So that's the unique part about it, right? The Indigenous royalties already exist and they're all across this country. So it's a bit different.
Yeah. We got a question here. Are you completely restricting your royalty opportunities to Indigenous oriented companies?
Hypothetically, we would look at anything, right? At the end of the day, if we think it's a good royalty that's going to make our company stronger, we would do that. That said, you never say never. Again, we'll look at anything, but I suspect the higher quality royalties are going to be in the Indigenous landscape, so it's going to make a lot more sense for us to transact there.
Yeah.
But hypothetically, if there's an amazing non-Indigenous royalty that we can get for like a good deal on, sure. But
hot deal.
if there's 28 plus other people looking at it too, I'd be a little skeptical, but you never know.
Yeah. Another question here. At this time, how do you plan to make use of the cash? What opportunities do you see, including return to investors?
So certainly with just the Nisga'a Nation in, we will not be doing dividends. Really, the cash will be used for two purposes, right? Either in a partnership with a new Indigenous group, perhaps they want 10 to 20% of the partnership in cash. And so then we'll use the cash for that. But then otherwise, any excess cash, and again, we have a lower cash needs than a traditional mining royalty company because we're not doing 100% cash transactions. If we have excess cash, we'd be announcing a dividend to return that to our shareholders. So, but we do that very prudently, right? If we go out with a dividend, we don't want to have to retract it. So, and right now in the near term, a lot of that cash could quite conceivably be going to in some sort of partnership with a new group, and then perhaps we would announce a concurrent equity raise to replace that cash, obviously, to make sure that we've got a good amount in the treasury.
Yeah. Premier Elby just made some very positive comments about British Columbia and the development. So that must affect your KSM asset.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, the mining markets can be cruel, and sometimes good news comes out, and investors are underwhelmed at how the stocks move on that. So,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we can't control those factors. So really, we're focusing on new partnerships and building this portfolio, because it does seem to be the case that if we can announce more partnerships and grow this thing, it'll kind of wake the world up to this model. Because I would say most people right now probably have no real idea of the strength of the Indigenous royalties that are out there. Because again, it's just such a new market. We're really going to have to announce deals to be able to talk about them. And that's something I can't wait for, because it's torturous for me to be I can't really talk about anything specific until it's actually announced.
Yeah. Well, you've been in the boardroom before and cut these big deals before with your history. So best of luck to you on that. We look forward to following the story. And if any of the investors have questions, Derek, you were extremely open and very approachable at the show, and gave a great presentation to me. And that's why we asked you to come here today. So thank you for that. And we'll look forward to staying in touch.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Arlen. And yeah, anyone with any questions, reach out.